You're listening to Checking In, a self-help book club hosted by Adam and Amber, where we read self-help books each week and sit down to talk about them.
Disclaimer: the opinions recorded on this podcast are our own and do not reflect the authors mentioned here. Hey folks, welcome back. You're here with Adam and Amber, not live, pre-recorded, in front of no audience.
Oh, were you going to say lie?
Live! This is the Checking In podcast. We're a book club. We talk about self-help books.
I also wanted to say thank you to everybody who has reached out to tell me that they like my voice. I am actually really self-conscious about that, so it was really nice and it meant a lot to me.
Yay. And thanks to everybody for listening and saying things or not saying things. You do you. So today we have no trigger warning.
I mean, I think there could be a trigger warning for like religious trauma for sure.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to like get into and discuss like how much fun religious trauma is.
I mean, but it's still
going to be in the mix.
Yeah, it's still pretty upsetting.
So heads up, that happens a little bit. But I maintain that this is not going to be a scary episode.
No, I'm glad you picked this one because I can tell you've been really looking forward to it.
I haven't.
You hadn't really you hadn't looked forward to some of the other books we've read.
How do you know?
Because I can tell.
She knows things. Today's book is Comedy Sex God by Pete Holmes.
Comedy Sex God?
Yeah, and that's the fun / joke of the title. I don't know how many people that's gonna run off. But so Pete Holmes is a stand-up comedian, writer, whatnot. And he has a podcast called You Made It Weird. Generally, the outline of his podcasts are they talk about comedy, they talk about sex, and they talk about God.
Oh, cool.
But it kind of seems like the publisher was like, can we give it something zingier than, comedy youth pastor goes awry or something, because Pete Holmes is a large, goofy white dude.
I really got when you first told me about him, I was picturing two other big, or they seem to be big, white guy comedians. I was picturing Mike Birbiglia and Bo Burnham for the longest, and then I think I googled
those are both much smaller humans than,
oh really
than Pete Holmes
but I think
is.
I ended up googling him. I was like, oh, this guy.
Yeah, this fucking guy.
This guy.
Actually, it would be a lot more accurate to picture Conan and then turn him into a youth pastor.
Conan is scary looking to me.
Well, let's not tell him that.
I mean, he's he don't care, but
no, he doesn't. He's got your cash already. He doesn't care. So in lieu of giving a bio for Pete Holmes, we already told you about him and what he is and what he does. Essentially, his stand-up humor is pretty silly, pretty lighthearted, and then a few years ago, something happened and it started taking a turn, and we'll get to that later. So he did write a book, and I was wanting to check in with Pete and maybe get a blurb from him before the episode. Maybe we can do it after. Maybe he'll be listening into this at some point. But I wanted to see Pete's thoughts on whether or not this is even a self-help book. And we were talking at the end of the last episode, fuck it, we make the rules.
yeah, who cares?
Yeah, who cares whether or not this is a self-help book? But I kind of think that my angle on the dangle is that it's a story about how Pete helped himself.
I mean, you can make anything a self-help book. Look at Catcher in the Rye. That's
it's dark. This helped me to become a loner slash nut job.
But yeah, at first I was like, really? I mean, it's because it starts out kind of like a memoir.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, no, this is really insightful and helpful, especially to someone like me, because it seemed like we had kind of similar backgrounds growing up, even though he grew up in Boston or near Boston. And I grew up in the South. It seemed like we both were infected by evangelism. I feel like his disposition, though, was more like, okay, I really, really am into this. I'm really into God. I'm really into Jesus and all this Christianity teachings. But I was more like, I hate this. What is wrong with me? Like, like
Yeah.
I was like, okay, like I'm trying, I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to do, but I still hate this. And so there must be something wrong with me.
I gathered from the book that Pete similarly felt that something was wrong, but not in the same way. So Pete, in attempting to be a good little boy and do what he thought would endear him to his mother, he just got real into church after she suggested that they start going. And he kind of got caught up in the rule following.
Well,
and,
his parents weren't as into it.
Right.
Which I thought was a little strange because, I mean, I wouldn't have been up in there if my
Right.
parents didn't make me go like
unless
3
it
times
was
a
required.
week. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. So he's way into it. But we come to recognize later that, like, him being way into it was actually like he kind of thought they were going to answer some different questions than the questions that they answered, which
Right.
was essentially don't ask questions.
Yeah, because there were a couple times where he seemed to ask questions of his peers or his elders in the church, and they just gave him very, very off the wall answers. And I'm like, well, yeah, I grew up, don't ask that type of question.
Right. And so these types of questions, just to, like, obviously this is funny that all this shit happened in hindsight. So we're talking about God, and then sex is already kind of coming into it. And that's kind of what he's talking
Well,
about.
I mean, he's growing up.
He's growing up and he's having these urges, and he's like horny all the time. And he's trying to figure out why. Where is this coming from? Is this like some darkness inside of me?
Yeah.
Is there something wrong with me? Because I thought that when I accepted Jesus Christ into my heart, that all this stuff was supposed to stop.
Right.
And instead, he's just horny all the time, like he's some kind of like,
Teenage boy
or something.
Yeah. I definitely remember being super riddled with that guilt. And not knowing like what was wrong with me. And, of course, like I wasn't as emboldened to ask specifically, like, why am I having these thoughts all the time? But I was, any other thing that you would deal with in church when you're that age, they kind of meet it with, you need to pray about it more.
Yeah.
And you need to have more faith, and your faith is not strong, and that's why you're struggling.
Yep. He got that a lot.
Yeah.
I remember when I was single digits still, and I'm asking the grown-ups around me, where do babies come from? And the answer that I got was some very tiptoey talk about like, well, when a man loves a woman very much. And I'm like, oh, this is the sex talk. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like, why does this, inexplicable miracle
Why
happen?
do babies come from?
Why do babies come from? Where were they before they were here?
Where did they come from?
And it's really those kind of questions that a young Pete is asking. He doesn't want the sex talk. Like, that's not what I was asking for. I'm asking for like a deeper, like, why the universe?
Yeah.
Why us? Why, why any of this? And he's always been asking those questions in a religious setting
Mm-hmm.
and never really getting answers. And this is the stuff that he's interested in from day one. And I dig that,
Yeah. And I remember my grandmother who has passed away, but she always had really great insight into her faith as well. God wants us to ask questions all the time.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
why
And
would they be popping up?
so she always was very kind and humorous of my, like, well, what about the dinosaurs? Like, why aren't they in there? When, if I asked that question in church, it would be like, dinosaurs didn't exist
Or
or something
somebody's
just
gonna
insane.
somebody's gonna slap
Or
you or
like,
something.
she knew that I loved like the Harry Potter books because it's make believe. And if I were to ever bring something like that up at church, it would be like, witches are real. And it, to me, like at 10 or 11 years old, I did not know that people practice witchcraft. So they are literally just like confusing the hell. So I'm thinking that there are literal like dragons and demons and like, Harry Potter type witches.
As a child, you're
I'm missing out on this.
you're trying to form like this separation between make believe stuff and real stuff, and then
Yeah.
you have grown-ups telling you some pretty far out things when that stuff is supposed to be solidifying. And
Right.
it keeps there being like a gray area for a really long time sometimes.
You remember those like not Halloween, Valentine's Day little cards you can buy at like or CVS or Walgreens or something, and they're like Mario or like Sonic the Hedgehog or like Pokemon, and you like give them to your classmates. Like I wanted the Harry Potter ones, but like it's like a meme at this point. It's like that Southern kid who's not allowed to have like any Harry Potter stuff. I just
Bible Belt.
distinctly remember that as a child.
I'm sure we're going to have some Midwestern listeners that are going to have some kind of similar stories.
Oh yeah, I mean Christianity evangelism has the United States in a chokehold for the 90s and the early 2000s. So it's not like just growing up in the South, which a lot of people seem to think it is, but it's definitely just kind of an American experience, I think.
Yeah, and I grew up in a setting where, I probably went to church 5 times by the time I was 18.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know a whole lot of people who grew up like me in my adult life. So sometimes you'll like meet somebody and it'll kind of come out at some point. Like I grew up in church and you're like, oh, one of us, like,
Yeah.
like she knows like all these crazy like Bible things or whatever. Like, oh yeah, I remember that too. That was so insane.
I did go to a school. I went to a college that had just had its Baptist funding like withdrawn or withheld or whatever the year before I got there. Therefore, nobody said anything about, hey, this is a Christian college. I'm thinking college. And so that's not in any of the literature, pamphlets, whatnot.
You didn't Google it?
I didn't Netscape it. I did not ask Jeeves whether or not. And by the way, this would have been the year that most people got the internet, So I'm sitting there in the computer lab, occasionally seeing other students looking up porn, in this
That's pretty ballsy.
in this formerly Christian computer lab. But there were a lot of the same kind of Christians at my school that Pete's talking about in the book. And he's talking about like the rush of Christian conformity.
Yeah.
Like, well, you were a doughy little chubby kid, that was unpopular and not particularly good at anything. But now you have this friends group of people with similar interests and the absolute same religion.
Yeah.
Who are frowning down at your peers that are having sex, trying drugs,
Right.
drinking. And so they've got this like abstinence card.
Yeah. Which we had that too.
I was going to
Growing
say,
up.
didn't y'all have an abstinence card type?
Yeah. It wasn't like his was kind of funny. It was like check boxing, like things you're willing and not willing to do before marriage. Ours was basically like, it's like a little business card, and it's like, I'm not gonna have sex before marriage, and you sign it and you just like keep it in your wallet.
And every single time you go to do anything, you're reminded that you checked like this, like, hey, don't forget, stay clean. We're gonna
When I reached for the condoms in the wallet.
Shit, I already checked this fucking box.
It's a contractual.
Never mind.
Contractually obligated.
So while he's doing this stuff, so he checks a few of those boxes and then backtracks when he sees that the other kids are like, well, I'm not going to try anything. Like, oh, right, yeah.
Not even holding hands.
I'm not even going to hold hands with a girl.
Kiss.
No, girls. So he's starting to get into like the conditional nature of God's love.
Right.
And this is where that trauma kind of starts to come in. It's where it, arguably starts to fuck Pete up.
Yeah.
And probably a lot of us as well, as you start to get this idea of like, there is something wrong with me. If I want to do these things, or if I do these things, everything's ruined. Like you were saying, I'll be like an old Band-Aid.
Yeah. So like one of the previous episodes we talked about comparing in those abstinence only type classes, comparing people who have had sex to chewed up pieces of gum, Band-Aids, and that's just incredibly horrible. Also, it made me think at a later date, like, what about the people who had been assaulted in some sort of way?
Yeah.
How, that is so insensitive and awful.
Yeah, sorry, those people are not going to heaven.
A bunch of kids. Yeah, because a lot of people who have been sexually assaulted don't even realize it, until way later. So.
Yeah. Speaking of a book or two ago.
But I remember not being told that God wouldn't love you. It was basically being told, like, God would love you, but you would be punished.
Oh, wow.
Like, over and over again because he loves you.
Wow.
Wow. And then your ultimate punishment is going to hell.
Yeah. Suddenly this religion is starting to sound kind of
I used to think, like, I remember I used to think my friends' parents were going to hell for saying cuss words. Like, I would go home and be like, Mama, Rhonda used the word ass.
And now you did too.
I know, it's just like the most square. I remember I thought my granddad was going to hell because he smoked cigarettes.
Mm-hmm. But that like not cussing thing comes from.
To which Rhonda said, "Ass is in the Bible."
Right. I was gonna say that it's there's a passage in the Bible about do not take the Lord's name in vain.
Right. That is not.
That's not what that means.
No, that is not. Oh my God, or for God's sakes. That is literally. Which, this is kind of a soapbox of mine. When people who are of certain political leanings use God in their message to oppress and hurt people, that is taking the Lord's name in vain. And that is honestly highly offensive to people who really do believe in the Lord and God and Christ-like teachings.
Yeah, let's not bring God into your opinion here for like why these people should be put down or oppressed or hurt or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like I'm pretty sure that God with the capital G is not going to have you do evil shit.
Not super into that, no.
So Pete's feeling, he calls it a speedball of the urge to masturbate and then feeling like God's mad at him afterward.
Yeah.
So he's like, I just want to get it over with. I'm tired. I don't want to be horny anymore.
Right.
And gets it over with and feels incredibly shameful. And he's like destroying his brother's porn.
Yeah.
And then mending it later.
That part was crazy.
And
but it was
stressful.
Funny. Yeah.
You know, like I can feel the pain of that
Right.
fucking weird little kid. Like, I'm sorry, dude.
Right.
This is probably unnecessary. Why are you dipping the calendar in oil? Why are you dipping it in motor oil?
Right. Oh my
Fucking weird kid.
gosh. Bless his heart.
So he's feeling really bad about these urges, and he's experiencing a lot of like fix-it behavior, calling it a speedball of horniness and shame.
That's so sad. It's so complicated though to feel like that.
And then to try to fix that, like,
Well, I mean, just think about like having an orgasm and then having this like feeling follow.
Immediately regret.
You know,
Yeah.
like these are supposed to be like happy
Like,
times.
well,
in our
I'm
life.
going to hell now.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's like asking in Sunday school, like, what about masturbation?
Right, like no one would do that,
And-
like straight up.
And of course, there's no adults that are
Yeah.
going to be, oh, God. Oh, I know exactly what the answer for this is.
Yeah, like what can I say?
Yeah, like pretty much no matter what, I'm about to fuck this kid up.
I did like the analogy he used that I'm remembering right now, where he talks about how like people were really angry that the teachers didn't have master's degrees, but when these people in church are just like these random teenage or early 20s volunteers who are just not qualified at all to tell kids like all these grand notions of spirituality.
And that's what Pete wanted to be. You know, he's got like not great grades. The teachers are trying to get his parents to kind of adjust their expectations accordingly. And he almost didn't go to college because of it. He almost like went straight to Sunday school youth pastor just because he looks like one anyway.
Yeah.
Look him up. It's true. This is usually a bit that he does. But what I was going to say is that like he's trying to get out of the horniness and shame speedball situation by like, hey, I'm going to make sex completely okay in the eyes of God. I'm going to get married.
Right.
You know?
Which a lot of, I mean, if you've grown up like I did, you know a lot of people like this who like, oh, we got married because we're so in love at 18. It's because we just love each other so much. It's like,
We
no,
need to have sex.
we just really want to have sex.
Really
We
bad.
really, really do. And I love him so much because you want to have sex with him. That's okay.
Yeah. That's probably the same thing. But the guilt persists and sex stays weird.
So that happened to me. I got married at the ripe old age of 26. And I, well, my mom, she cringes every time I tell this story, but my mom at one point during the wedding preparations and stuff was like, well, typically older brides, Amber, you know, do this and this. And I was like, so I have like my friends telling me I'm pretty much like a child bride. Like, why are you getting married so young?
Yeah. And your mom's like, this is way too
Yeah,
late
you're
to be
way
betrothed.
too old. But yeah.
This is the latest arranged marriage ever. Ugh.
Yeah, like it was kind of like on Broad City where Hannibal
bride?
brings up like marrying Alana and she's 28. She's like, "What am I, a child bride?" But yeah, so after I got married, even though I was so far removed from organized religion at that time, because I left the house when I was 18, was still guilt over being sexual.
Why do you think that, like, once you have checked the boxes and gotten married, so where there's like, okay, so like, I've done everything you say, and now I'm going to have sex. Like, why is it still weird?
I guess just because it's like you've really trained your brain for a long time to feel that kind of guilt and feel that kind of shame, especially as women, with like the whole virginity type of social construct that they kind of shove down women's throats. I think that anytime you are engaging in sexual acts, it's so much more complicated than just kind of letting go and being free.
It takes a lot of training, basically, to
Yeah.
let go and be free,
Yeah.
even once you're free to. Yeah, it's really unfortunate.
I know a lot of people who have said similar things, like they've grown up in church, they got married, and still feel guilty. It's just, well, yeah, because you're being psychologically, damaged.
Conditioned to believe
Right.
what this is one of those things where the
It's like if you told somebody to feel, which some people do, if you felt guilt anytime you were hungry.
ooh, yeah.
Which a lot of people have that, compulsion. It's just like you're really training your brain, but that's having sex and eating are physical human needs. So,
And people definitely feel some ways about both. Sometimes both at the same time.
yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds like his first wife is a wonderful person.
Yeah.
And she's extremely supportive.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of stuff to like grow together, bond together.
Well, they're also like, what, 22, 23?
They're kids. They got married about the same age I got married the first time.
Right.
And it winds up being roughly the same size mistake, which anyone who's ever heard me talk about my first wedding night or my first marriage or first divorce or any of that, it's all like this gargantuan, like it outsizes most of the other incidents in my life, even though it happened a long time ago, didn't last all that long. But these are still formative years before my brain is finished developing. And therefore, this person gets to get in at the very last second and go like, I'm going to install a few bugs in your system. Good luck getting them out. And Pete does not expect that she's about to leave him. He doesn't expect that she's cheating on him. He doesn't expect that she's cheating on him with one of the teachers that she's teaching with. This is hilarious. So it's so not on his radar that he, like when she sits him down to have the talk with him, he's lost. And when it does start settling in, he's like, it's another comedian, isn't it? Oh, Pete. No.
That's so funny.
No. So sorry to your ego, buddy. This doesn't have anything to do with comedy.
At least I know you'll never cheat on me with anybody funnier
Impossible.
because I am the funniest.
So how could God let this happen to him?
Right.
He's done everything that he was supposed to do, and something bad still happened. And this shakes his faith to its rusty core. It wasn't firm in the first place. Pete wanted to belong. Pete wanted to believe. Pete wanted answers. But when it comes down to it, his faith was a pretty shaky construct.
Yeah.
So his wife is leaving him and God goes with her. He essentially loses his faith because God didn't protect him. And it's funny, we're going to be talking about Joseph Campbell in a little while, but this is a lot like one of the first things that happens in any hero's journey. Where, we have to have some sort of reason for the Hobbit to leave the Shire.
Okay.
This comfy little dude is not just about to pick up and set his blankets down and step away from his shows that he's binging and the girl that he's cuddling just like for no reason. No, he has to get shoved out of the nest. Stuff has to start happening.
Yeah.
For me, that's where the story starts getting interesting and where the whole idea of this actually kind of being a self-helpy kind of thing starts to come in. Did you have any thoughts about this area of the book where he's like starts to realize that his faith is like a product of where and when and how he was born?
I never really had that kind of epiphany personally. I think I was kind of always just on my way out.
Yeah.
Like, this is just not working for me, but I didn't realize how much damage that was caused, when I was kind of being forced and told all these horrible things about myself. So when I got older, it wasn't like a very conscious decision. It was basically just like, this is not going to be part of my life. This is a part of my life that really is painful.
Yeah.
But I thought I was fine.
So for you, it was more like, well, my parents said that I had to go to bed at this time, and I'm not going to do that anymore because I'm not living with them. And they said that, I've got to brush my teeth when I first wake up, and I will do that if I want to, but not because I have to.
I mean, if anybody knew me in college, I mean, bless your heart, I was just like buck wild. And, just had so much energy and naivete because I had just grown up so sheltered. And not really knowing like all the horrible pockets I would find myself in.
Which you wouldn't have found if you had stayed on the straight and narrow.
I don't know.
I feel like that's like the purpose of it is to try to keep your, kids from going off and getting lost and killed and stuff like that. But in the end, it's, really a lot of the time we're just like, hey, don't go out and live. So he loses his religion and this is so funny. He starts meeting and becoming actual friends with atheists.
Yeah.
And he had been thinking of atheists as like these lawless, amoral people.
Right. Like you're picturing like Roger Klotz from Doug. He must be an atheist.
Yeah.
Like, he's bad.
And instead, like, well, okay, so these people are still following the rules.
Right. Like, what?
And it turns out that, like, well, hang on, so we don't steal stuff because, then the person that's running the store is going to get in trouble and they might get fired. And they hip him to the idea that, like, for atheists, moral atheists, there's really just like one or two rules. Rule 1, don't be a dick.
Right.
Well,
I mean, I just think it's kind of like shitty people are Christians. There are shitty people who are atheists. There are nice people who are Christians.
Yep.
There are nice people who are atheists.
Basically, you go all around the world and you find that people are all the same.
Pretty much.
They're all kind of assholes to some degree, and they're all wonderful to some degree. You just have to find them, just like anywhere,
Yeah.
Like this other group of people is not bad just because they're a different tone.
Yeah. Well,
just
and
tell that to the folks back home.
I remember reading in the book and remembering grappling with, is Anne Frank in hell?
Yeah.
Is all these Jews, all these people, are they perishing forever?
And if so, who do I talk to about this?
Right.
All right, we're going to take a quick break for kids and dogs, and we'll be back right after these messages.
Did you enjoy the messages?
Yeah.
It's like, what messages?
Well, I'll tell you, it's funny you should bring that up. Today's podcast is brought to you by Truck Nuts.
Oh, my God.
Don't let them misgender your truck. Put on a pair of Truck Nuts today. Every child in America will squeal with glee when they see Truck Nuts.
Oh no, we should have this episode sponsored by Horny Goat Weed. Niacin. It's what's for dinner.
So we were talking about moral atheists and don't be a dick.
Yeah.
And then just like the whole thing where Pete loses his wife and his God in the same year.
Sad.
And a friend of his asked, "Have you read Codependent No More?"
Oh my God, that part was so funny.
And he replied, "My wife and I were going to read that together."
Oh my goodness. Lord, that was so funny.
That is a dad joke long before this man was actually a father. And I love it. I'm here for it. We're getting to what I feel like is the point of the book. Mm-hmm. He finds his reintroduction to the divine in some mushrooms at Bonnaroo.
I know. I was like a white girl's fantasy.
Yeah.
Like
being handed mushrooms by Reggie Watts.
And just like being like, I found my inner peace. Someone threw up next to me
So
at Bonnaroo.
He has one of those huge, like, life-changing trips like what I had a couple of springs ago when I was in the middle of doing 3 solo albums, and in between the first and second one, I took like a massive dose of mushrooms and talked to the sun for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And Pete, likewise, like kind of breaks through. Like he gets through that like early phase of tripping where it's like, well, I might be feeling something. And then the later, phase above that where it's like, it's hard to talk and I'm confused and it's very difficult to do anything. And then on the other side of that, boom, there it is. Like the feeling of oneness, the feeling that like we are all at one. We're all part of God. We're all part of the same thing.
Or he's just high.
Or he's, well, I mean, the fucking difference.
It's just mushrooms.
It's what's the difference? So he refers to it as this was the world, the one I had just been in all my life, nudged delightfully to the left. And I of course identified with that so much. I refer to that as being like over there versus over here. Over here is where, all of the normal things happen, and over there we're still here, but somehow it's different now. Like there's this whole way of looking at everything that like the mushrooms unlock for us. And I love this part. I was gone like sugar stirred into a glass of iced tea.
Well, sugar doesn't dissolve into iced tea.
Try telling that to Pete Holmes on mushrooms.
It needs to be hot. Become a barista.
That's one way that you can tell he's from Boston, for sure. He doesn't know about sweet tea yet. He just gets the feeling while he's tripping balls that like the one thing that is everything that we're all part of is here, and it's glad to see him. Which is kind of like the opposite of the feeling of depression. It's like a feeling of separateness and, I don't belong here, and everybody and everything would be a lot happier if I wasn't here, versus I'm part of everything and everything is happy to see me. Like you can't, that's not an assumption that you make. That's just like, that's an overwhelming feeling that you will sometimes, not always, get on mushrooms or other hallucinogens, which, are kind of equally or more powerful. But he has this beautiful experience at Bonnaroo, and it kind of starts to turn things around and send him on a quest.
Fucking Bonnaroo.
like
like
he's leaving the Shire for...
Oh my God. If you throw in another freaking Lord of the Rings analogy.
Melon.
Oh my God. I wonder if we were there the same year.
You probably were. Okay, so obviously you did not have, this is a fine time to take a detour. You have not had the feeling of the oneness yet.
Me?
Right.
I
Or
mean,
have you?
I mean, it's not like I don't feel like that. It's just kind of like, as I've gotten older, I have been a lot more introspective, I guess, about what I believe and what I feel and what my purpose is. And I definitely do not feel like God is worried about who I'm having sex with, or if I
Yeah.
say, oh my God. I don't think that.
Right?
I
There's
feel like that's a little humanly trivial.
That's not going on the scorecard.
I feel
It just
like,
isn't.
yeah, I feel like these things are human dramas.
Yeah.
Um,
And I had a moment where I wasn't even the first time I talked to the sun, I was not on any drugs at all whatsoever. I had a moment I was on top of Haleakala, which is the big volcano in Maui, and I watched the sun come up over the caldera of the volcano, and the sun peaks up over, and I have this strange sensation like it's looking at me. And I let me see if I can get this feeling to happen in the listeners' minds. Have you ever been looking at, I don't know, something in the dark and then realized that there was an eye looking at you? And it's a startling feeling where you realize that, like, I thought I was alone, but instead I'm being perceived also right now. And it can be alarming, scary, funny. Like you realize that there's somebody looking at you from behind that curtain, and it kind of fucks you up for a second. And that was the startled feeling that I had, and I heard a voice just as clear as day as I'm feeling this star looking at me. It goes, "What do you want to be forgiven for? You haven't done anything." And that was it. That was there was no like, "Hi, hello, how are you?" I didn't come up there to ask for forgiveness. This was apropos of nothing. And I felt like I got like a little glimpse into just like what happens when the lines of communication with the universe are open. The sun's like, "Why are you carrying around this guilt? Fucking idiot." None of your shit matters. Just go be happy. I was going to read a little excerpt of the book, but I think that I've got kind of enough times when I'm probably going to try to do this. But the point of the excerpt that I was going to read was basically Pete just freaking out about mushrooms and the fact that he feels God, which he was genuinely worried that that was just never going to be there again. And that, he's just an atheist now and all is lost. And when we die, nothing happens. And that all of this is pure chaos and is happening for no reason. Of course, a human is going to miss the idea of God and order, like, of course we want to create that.
I don't know. I feel like some people it can be relieving.
Yeah, and I know that for Julia Sweeney, that was definitely the case. That like nothing means anything, and that's fucking beautiful. Like all of this majesty is still here. It doesn't. Nothing had to create this. It's just happening on its own, and isn't that a miracle? Anyway, Pete and Julia Sweeney had a long conversation about that in one episode, and they kind of agreed to disagree about like, their main talking points about why there is/isn't God. Anyway, Pete is freaking out about the mushrooms, and he's saying that God wasn't done talking to us. The lines were still open. The source is as close as the air on your skin, and the conversation is just getting started. I felt like that was a beautiful little passage, especially considering that Pete is not a writer of novels. So, he's not a writer of prose so much as he is a comedian. And, I thought it was a beautiful passage. From there, he he goes on to explain who Joseph Campbell is.
Yeah.
And
He has a few figures pillared in this
yes.
part of the book.
And I already knew who some of them were.
Mm-hmm.
And Joseph Campbell is one that I grew up with.
Like, yeah, I didn't know who that was.
Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth was, I believe, like a PBS series when I was about 10. Okay. And Dad would call me into the room. Hey, get in here. You know, because to him, he's like, oh, man, this is far out shit, you know. And he wanted this kid, me, to experience this.
Is it like aliens?
Aliens. Well, I remember that one of the things in the very opening is a crystal skull that was found in South America.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, any kid is going to be like, well, it's, crystal skull's pretty cool.
Ancient aliens is what we watch now.
The history. But the reason he brings up Joseph Campbell is the idea that he doesn't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And here's what I mean by that. Joseph Campbell is saying that God is a myth?
Yeah, well, he says it's a myth. And I remember Pete talking about how that would offend somebody because you are perceiving in your mind that a myth is something that's false.
A myth is a lie.
Yeah.
But Joseph Campbell is, no, like it is simply a story told with metaphors.
Yeah.
And that God is a metaphor for the great mystery, for like, whatever you're calling it.
Yeah. Well, he's getting at we're basically all worshiping the same thing. We're all kind of doing the same things because I've had this conversation with you, Adam, before where...
I don't recall.
Just preemptively.
COVID joke.
One of my really hard moments in my youth was figuring out, so I was 10 or 9 during 9/11. And... so you're hearing this whole time, like, Muslims are evil. Muslims believe all these crazy evil things. And then when you get to a certain age and you're like, they believe the exact same thing. And I'm like, what? And like Judaism, I grew up in rural Alabama. There were no freaking Jewish people. Like maybe in like a more metropolis area, but like definitely not in where I grew up. And it's just like... in
Montgomery, we had a fairly sizable Jewish community.
For sure, yeah.
But this is I am going to be walking the line here on saying racist shit. But the Jewish people that we had in Montgomery just looked like fucking regular ass white Alabama people,
Well, like, I mean, I think even the ones that I came to know, like as an adult, are just look like normal people too. But I was just like mystified. People. Like I was just like mystified. Like, oh wait, Jews believe the exact same.
They believe that you should be good to people.
And I even remember having these, I remember in my church, for some reason, people didn't like Catholics. I grew up Baptist, so they were not fans of Catholic people.
Basically, everybody that's not your specific
and then
religion is heathens.
I was like, well, what do Catholics believe? And it's like,
same shit.
Same exact
same shit
thing.
Same shit, a little guiltier.
And I think when I was a teenager, I'd gone to an Episcopal church with one of my teachers, and I had never in my life, I was like, whoa, this is way different, Yeah,
there's a lot more gold.
But at the same time, I'm like, but we're still doing this. We're still worshiping the same exact thing.
Yeah. But like, enough can't really be said about the baby sacrifices, however. I feel like that's really where,
Yeah, that
and it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I never knew. And then at some point, I just never knew why so many religious leaders spent so much time that I recall hating on, just being a hater in the pulpit.
Well, you're selling something, right? You're selling your magic.
Or even like,
And everybody else's magic is bad and evil, but if you stay in this building, then you'll be in here with the good people. All
what,
of us are going to the same heaven.
what was it that I read? It was like, I have lots of diverse friends. I'm friends with Shirley, and she's a Methodist. And I remember even asking, like, well, what's the difference? And they were like, nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. David Cross had a joke about going over, like, growing up here. And he, growing up Jewish in Dunwoody or whatever.
Oh, really?
It was,
I didn't know he was from Georgia.
He's from like barely OTP outside the perimeter of Atlanta. I saw him do a show like across the street from the place where his mitzvah was. But he was saying, like, he'd go over and spend the night at a friend's house and wake up in the morning and mom would be cooking breakfast like, y'all's people eat oatmeal?
Oh, my God. That's so funny.
So us rural folks really like to other people.
Oh, for sure.
Really do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just like, it's no bacon.
Right. Probably. Probably
Right.
no bacon.
Right. My grandparents on my dad's side are Mormon, and yeah, the no coffee thing. They drink coffee. Like, it's whatever.
Yeah, it depends on how practicing we are.
Yeah.
So this was another great quote from the book and from a really unexpected source. Barry Taylor, road manager of AC/DC,
Oh, that
said,
was so funny.
God is the name of the blanket we throw over the mystery to give it shape. I think
Right.
about that so often.
From AC/DC road manager.
I had lost the AC/DC road manager part of it and was just like, throwing a blanket over God while he, tries to make it look like it's struggling. This is a dumb mental picture. Sorry. So he experiences a shift from there on out. This shift made my search for God more inward. Spirituality becomes about a feeling that no one else can feel for you. And because of what Joseph Campbell had said about, God being a metaphor, and essentially the religion that he was raised with is a myth. Like, there's stories, archetypes, lessons. All of these things are true. All of these things are good lessons that you'll find in any religion.
Right.
But stop trying to prove that these incidents actually happened. You may come up short on evidence.
Yeah.
The thing is the point of the story.
Yeah, that was really never a thing for me. Like, I don't really remember like feeling like I needed like archaeological evidence that Jesus existed, but I do remember anytime that is questioned, it's basically just like, well, then you're not a real Christian if you don't just like have blind faith in that this happened.
Yeah, you're one of those questioners. Terrible people. All right, so I'm going to try to move myself along as much as possible. Pete starts to realize that a lot of things that Jesus said were like Christians are rooting for him from the sidelines and like, yeah, die for our sins, whatever that means, like go forth and do these deeds, whatever that means. But what he's saying is that Jesus came and was thoroughly enlightened, compares him to the Buddha. Mm-hmm. And Buddha means like the one who woke up.
I mean, Christ-like teachings are so vastly different from what I think mainstream Christianity looks like.
Oh, sure. I think there's a reason for that.
Yeah, sadly.
It's for the same reason that if Jesus was real in the first place, why he was crucified is that he teaches some stuff that's pretty dangerous to the establishment.
Yeah. Jesus is just all right with me.
Just all right?
I'm a big fan of his musical that he wrote.
Like when we went to the desert last week and I was really disappointed that there was no Jesus-based musical just happening out there. So Pete is saying suddenly I wasn't here to build a case for someone else's journey, but to go on one of my own.
Right.
So Jesus begins to mean to Pete, go and do likewise. You know, don't root for Jesus from the sidelines. Like, you have the ball. Like, now you go do it.
Yeah.
Which is in some ways scarier. It demands something of you.
What would Jesus do?
Yeah. I feel like even that's been pretty watered down.
Yeah, I think so. The biggest bullies in school always had the freaking bracelets on.
The biggest assholes are WWJD people. Not always, but enough. Enough to really fucking...
Or like the people with the Jesus fish, like in traffic, are always like the worst. Or like the people who any server will tell you that Sunday after church rush is the rudest, meanest, nastiest people. Why is that? I don't know.
I've got some experience in this area.
We just went to church. Now it's time to start sinning again. Like, crack their knuckles.
I mean, I know what I felt like it was, that you have people who woke up, didn't eat anything.
Oh, yeah.
Sat in church.
You always tell me this like science explanation.
Well, I mean, they've got low blood sugar by the time they come walking in at 2:00. They've essentially,
like, I'm not going to tip this fool.
They've missed 2 meals. And
Look,
you, the one person between them and the food in the kitchen, are the problem. You know, like, never mind the fact that you're about to bring the food. You're holding shit up. Why are you talking to that other table?
Tipping is a fundament. Tipping should be the 11th commandment. I mean, who's to say it's not? Like Moses, we just watched Prince of Egypt. Like, I really have a good grasp on that story. Tipping is a fundamental thing that Christian after church people, for some reason, don't seem to grasp.
Yeah. Like, hey, by the way, your religion's supposed to still be on right now. I know that, like, you just...
In evangelism, they tell you, like, be a person that people know is a Christian and they see how you act, and that's what would inspire them. So, yeah. But in my experience as an adult, seeing Christians in the wild, so to speak, it's always like the meanest, nastiest folks. Very interesting.
A lot of the time.
Very interesting.
So let's get into Duncan Trussell.
Oh yeah, so I didn't know
remember,
I don't know this guy either.
I had shown you Duncan Trussell before.
Right. Well, that was a cartoon. I don't have a vision of what this guy looks like.
Yeah, y'all saw Midnight Gospel on Netflix, right?
Very trippy.
Very
cartoon.
trippy. And if you haven't seen the episode where Duncan Trussell, so what they did was, like, they had the people from Adventure Time, animate some of Duncan Trussell's podcast episodes and gave them, like, new trippy visual plots while these conversations are happening. Duncan's mom has terminal cancer, and they sit down and they talk about life. They talk about what just happened, you know, for the duration. Like, tell me about when I was born. And what do you think happens what do you think is going to happen when you die, Mom? You know, like, it is so hard. It's so hard and so rewarding to watch the finale, the last episode of Midnight Gospel.
Yeah. No, it was super sweet.
It was sweet, unflinching, terrifying.
But I was like, why did you show me that?
Yeah. Well, now you're starting to see.
Well, I'm just like, damn, it's like getting put on Schindler's List or something. Like, shit.
This is the worst Netflix and chill ever.
Yeah, it's a boner killer.
But it gave me a life boner. All of this, Amber, has been a gateway drug for something that we're building up to. And what happens at the very end of that episode is that reality or whatever ends, and he hops on a bus and sits down next to this old guy and says, "Can I interview you for my podcast?" And the guy replies, "Just be here now." So Duncan is a big fan of a guy named Ram Dass.
Yeah.
He's a big fan of Ram Dass's guru, Neem Karoli Baba,
Yes.
which those two are inseparable. You can't talk about Ram Dass without talking about the called
The other
him
guy.
as Maharaji. is the word I was
Maserati.
trying to
Yeah,
find.
that's what I was like. That's the word.
It's his Maserati.
Maserati.
Neem Karoli Baba. Anyway, so Pete goes over, they record a podcast episode, they talk about stuff. Duncan just exhibits so much of this kind of energy and enthusiasm for the spiritual that Pete really feels it and kind of starts getting sucked into it. And he does not right away do any research about Ram Dass or his guru, but he tucks it away. This is an important thing for later. But it was that meeting that convinced Pete that the point of prayer, and I've been thinking about this so much the last couple of days, the point of prayer is to clear up your connection to the divine within.
Right.
So when he's a kid, he's praying like, please pray for, these cats and kittens that died.
Right.
I want you to, please watch over my family and my brother. And, if I can get that bike for Christmas.
Right.
And now Pete's a man and he's kind of realizing that like, okay, so the point of prayer is I would like to hear you more clearly, just letting you know that I'm listening. And it's part of his practice, his like daily practice of like just trying to keep himself clear, that he begins praying again. The idea that like you don't need this book because there is no test. Like this is all really happening right now. Like stop studying for this.
Yeah.
All right. So here Ram Dass. Okay. So Pete goes through his little phase of what they call Whore Island. He's deprogramming codependency, enjoying sex, enjoying masturbation without shame.
I liked that. I laughed when I read that women were attracted to him for his feminine energy.
Yeah.
They felt like safe.
Yeah. Yeah, I've gotten that.
What? I don't know. I wouldn't say that.
Well,
about
it's,
Oh,
25 years ago,
you just
it's
care
like,
for people.
oh, I thought you were gay.
Oh, you just genuinely care for people. Oh, you
Weird.
see women as humans.
Oh, is this your move?
You must be a woman. You must be gay.
So if y'all have heard of the show Crashing on HBO, that was Pete. That was Pete Holmes. And it was created along with Judd Apatow. The show did really well. Lasted, 2 seasons? Maybe.
I didn't catch that one.
Maybe a third, but it was, definitely 2.
If you know anything about like relationship dynamics, there's always one person that's going to be a TV person and one person that's a movie person. I have watched very few TV shows, but I've seen a lot of movies.
Yeah.
Adam's seen a lot of cool shows, but I'm always like, I didn't catch that one. I don't know.
I was paying attention to this because I was into Pete.
Right.
Already.
No, I mean, it seems cool.
And, I separately was into Ram Dass.
Yeah.
And I made a similar mistake as Pete. And it's most most fans of Ram Dass would not call this a mistake. But for some reason, it was a swing and a miss more with Pete than with me. Like I just couldn't take it very seriously. But his book, Be Here Now, which for the first 3/4 of it is essentially like I've gotten into metaphysical shit and I just bought some incense and I'm going to put up pages from Be Here Now in my apartment.
And you're going to like have a tapestry with Christmas lights.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much nailed it. You know, like what kind of tapestry?
And you're going to go to
though?
Bonnaroo and you're going to eat mushrooms and you're going to have a divine enlightenment at Bonnaroo with MGMT in the back.
Podcast just looped itself. It's just lapped itself. So that didn't really land with him. I noticed that in the back of Be Here Now, it goes from essentially being artwork and metaphysical posters and sayings. And like it goes from this like calendar page a day type format of spirituality. The last bit of it, maybe the last quarter to third of it, is actually text. And in it, Ram Dass, whose name at that point was Richard Alpert, describes what led him to go to India to find this guy, which is that he was a professor and that he and Timothy Leary had been doing experiments with the students, giving them acid and giving them synthesized psilocybin. And just keeping an eye on them. And of course, these gentlemen are taking all of these substances themselves as well. It doesn't take long for like a Nixonian mindset to kind of catch up and go like, y'all can't be doing this in our college. Like this is sketchy as hell.
Yeah.
And so Timothy Leary gets cast to the wind in one direction and Richard Alpert gets cast in the other direction. And he goes to India. He finds this holy man. Holy man performs a small and strange but profound miracle that immediately changes this man in the way he thinks, feels, sees himself, and sees the world, and just breathlessly goes back home and tells everybody about it like an asshole because he wasn't supposed to. And he gets the new name from his teacher, and his new name is Ram Dass.
Right.
Servant of God.
Right.
And so I read that part in the back of the book, and I'm hooked by that.
Yeah.
I don't think Pete noticed that. Pete gets in when he starts listening to Experiments in Truth, which is a series of lectures by Ram Dass.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who really like those.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll listen to those every once in a while, but he's got like
He's got a lot of content.
Hundreds and hundreds
He's like
and
the
hundreds of
OG
lectures.
content creator.
Yeah, for sure. And the recordings on all of them are not awesome. I definitely say, like, if you can find some old footage of Ram Dass speaking, check it out because, like, not only is it, like, really nice, comforting, kind of mind-blowing stuff, but also, as Pete says, he's fucking funny.
He seems like a Shel Silverstein type of vibe.
Little bit. I would go so far as saying it's a sweeter vibe even than Shel Silverstein. Shel Silverstein has this darkness that makes him interesting and funny.
Yeah.
And Ram Dass
He
is
seems very love and light.
very love and light, and the comedy is almost always unexpected. And to me, that's when you're not expecting the punchline or a joke, that's when I laugh the hardest. But Pete says, yeah, not church funny, but comedian funny, genuinely.
Church funny.
Pete talking about religion, Ram Dass talking about religion. We have to choose our traps wisely. You don't want to be meditating. You want to be free. You don't want to be a Jew. You want to be free. You know, like you want to use these tools to free yourself. You don't want to get trapped by the tool. But the point of this is we have to choose our traps wisely and hope that they self-destruct after they've served their purpose, like using a stick to stoke a fire, which you eventually throw in. I've been thinking about this quote a lot this week. Ram Dass heard holy men comparing the human brain to a drunken monkey. You have to give it something to do. And he goes into talking about waking meditation, which for him is just the repetition of
well, that's Hindi.
Ram. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when they got those little beads and they're just like Hare Krishna, Hare 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 Hare, like over and over again, hundreds of times. I mean, that's what that is.
Yeah, it's not like they're saying a magical spell or anything. Like it's here is what my mind is doing right now, so that I can have peace from my mind.
Right.
When my mind doesn't have something to do, it starts trying to find evidence that I don't belong here.
Well, I mean, honestly, in Hindi, it's almost like a ritual because they treat it ritualistically because it like clears the mind so that you can be
here,
you can be present and you can worship more effectively. So in a way, it is a little bit like a ritual. But yeah, I mean, it comes out with the same outcome.
Yeah. So I've been doing that the last few days. Started it in the desert, and I've been trying to do it ever since. But like, the depression is coming back in, and what I'm doing for it is I'm just giving it something to do.
Yeah.
Like, could you please ignore me? And whether or not you think I need to be here on this planet, I'm pretty sure that I do. I'm going to give you something to do, which is just rum, rum, rum. And so it's thinking that while I feel fine. I get to go about my day unbothered by the weird, intrusive thoughts that depression likes to give me. Now I've given it something to do.
So, but Pete would do the yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you was very important.
I thought that was cool. This actually gets to the part where I disagree slightly.
Do it.
So, this is kind of my hot take here. He kind of talks negatively about folks who are taking pictures of things and who are analyzing things and who are. So his example was he's at a botanical garden. He, in his meditative state, is not taking pictures of the plants, is not learning about the plants, he is just being present, and he is kind of thanking the plant for being there and moving along. I go to botanical gardens and museums just because they're enjoyable. It's an enjoyable environment. You get to learn things. You do get to observe things you haven't seen before. You get to learn a lot of cool things, and it's very fun. And then on the part of like, well, you don't want to take a picture of it and just have that experience on Facebook. And I'm just like, I think people in this day and age, I think people are inspired a lot by things that are beautiful. And this is one thing that I thought about a lot in the desert. Whenever you're taking these photos, you're creating a piece of art. You're not just like, take the photo and go, store that, gonna use it later. You're looking at a good shot. You want it to look as beautiful as you're seeing it right now because you want to share that piece of art you're creating with the people you love.
Right.
And I mean, so I think that, just being inspired by what's around you and creating that little piece of art, whether it is something as trivial as just a picture on your iPhone, you're creating. I wouldn't take the same picture that Adam would take. This is a piece of me. And, I think that's more important than people give. I think people can just kind of trivially throw these things away.
So he's talking about how we consume life.
Yeah.
So he was saying that he didn't get museums.
And I love museums. I don't get and whenever I read that part, I was like, I don't get all the art I look at.
Right.
Sometimes I'm just like, this is strange. But I love going. I just like to see the art. I don't know. Like, I
Right.
don't really think too much about it.
Well, he was not at that point.
Right.
He could not get there. He was worried that he was doing something wrong when he was looking at the paintings.
Some people just aren't into museums.
Well, the point is not that the point's not the museum. The point's not the art. The point is, what are you experiencing? What do you think it is that you're looking for? Because he's going thinking that everybody is like, oh, look at the brushwork for this and look at the color choice for this. When really the point is like, and I say this to my youngest all the time, look at it. Okay. How does that make you feel? What's the feeling that you have when you look at this? And he'll respond genuinely and be like, cold. Like, fuck yeah, dude. You're absolutely right. That's totally what the artist was going for. And it's not about like proving that you were there. The point is feeling the thing that the artist was feeling when they painted it. Not checking a box. So instead of consuming, checking that box, he says, be consumed by it. Yeah. Like, just roll around in the flower for a while. Like, really just like, look at this one flower, get to know it, love it, accept it, say yes to it, Not like, this was the best looking flower that I found, and this was the best looking tree that I found. It was, gosh, it felt so cool to be in this place and to see these wonderful things. Yeah. It was a difference in his expectation of how to consume art or how to consume the botanical garden, when really the point is be consumed by it.
I mean, if you want to be, yeah. I just like having a good time. It's not that complicated for me.
Yeah. You can't really teach that.
This is nice.
All right. So we're kind of wrapping up with the stuff now, but as you can see, the entire book is just a gateway drug for Ram Dass.
Yeah.
And really just to find your own way. There are Christian people that warn against this book, that warn against Pete Holmes.
Oh, really?
But I think
Does he have some haters?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
And that would be, the more conservative Christians that are like, well, you're upsetting the natural balance.
That's
here.
how you know you succeed, when
Exactly.
you got some haters.
And really the point is that, like, well, how about you
Like, who cares?
be a Christian, you stay a Christian, and you let this info and mindset supercharge your Christianity so that you're an actual practicing Christian.
They don't want to do that.
Instead of somebody that shows up once a week and then goes and stiffs the
That's
server.
too hard. They don't want to do that. Go to therapy.
I hadn't mentioned this, but so Pete goes to Maui, like I did, but he goes to a retreat where you are in Ram Dass's presence.
I bet that shit, whenever he was talking about it, I was like, this shit probably cost so much fucking money.
I think it was a couple grand.
I think it's more than that. He's like literally sitting and chatting with this man.
Well, that's different.
Oh, right. That's the second time.
I had actually registered to win a trip to go to the retreat.
Oh, wow.
In December of 2019, I think. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure Ram Dass died at the end of December 2019.
Oh,
so that would have been my absolute last opportunity to go do this.
You should have gotten enlightened sooner.
Yeah,
why didn't you?
I missed him. So he goes to this thing and has a grand old time, but
I liked one of the things he talked about.
Yeah.
When he said, I was a little worried that I'm just trading one religion for another.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's what you were about to say, but I feel like sometimes I struggle with that as well.
Again, that's the trap.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't want to be a follower of Ram Dass. You want to be free.
Right.
You want to be free of all of that.
Right.
But
I think it's just people's personalities, to be quite honest.
he has a little blip and decides that he's going to go back. Mm-hmm. And he wants to do the one-on-one thing
Which
with
is an
Ram
extra
Dass.
$20,000.
I bet that was $5,000. I bet you anything.
I bet it was more than that. I don't know. Because he was like staying in a nice little villa with a pool.
That's at Ram's place.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's probably expensive to stay up in there.
Maui's expensive.
Right.
So this is funny, and it ties everything back together. So Pete is wrestling with this really odd problem first, he sits with Ram Dass and just feels this like he has this unusual experience where the room is just drenched with unconditional love that just seems to be flowing out of Ram Dass at all times. Mm-hmm. And they sit and are looking at each other, and Ram Dass is like, "You feel that?" And Pete's like, "Holy shit, yes." Like, he feels like he's tripping again. And he's like, "That's my guru." Like, "That's not you?" He's like, "No, that's my guru." And once again, one of the miracles of the Maharaji, I just thought that part was really fantastically written. Y'all should definitely check that part out. But Pete wrestles with, for his remainder of the time there, he wrestles with being very horny on this retreat.
I know. And that was so funny to me. I was like, wow, because I still wrestle with these feelings of shame as an adult who is, for the most part, pretty rational about my beliefs and my faith system. And I still like, why am I feeling so guilty?
Yeah.
For being a sexual person. And if I had a friend who came to me and said, "I'm at this retreat," and they're texting me, and they, and Adam gets to see secondhand some of my texting and funny phone conversations with my friend.
No, I don't.
I'm at this retreat and I can't focus, and I'm just like, who cares? Like, you're a person. Just masturbate. Just eat. Just drink. Just sleep.
Yeah.
Like, it's
and
not
Pete's
a big
like,
deal.
"I don't even know where I'm going to masturbate. Maybe I need to go. I can't masturbate in the villa. I need to go, maybe I'll go jerk off in the car." But like, no, then he'll know this is all bad.
Like, who cares?
And he's sitting with Ram like later that day after he's thinking about it. And Ram is like, "What were you thinking about just then?"
Yeah. And he's like, honest. I feel like I would have fibbed.
Yeah.
I feel like I would have been like, yeah, I was thinking about the trees and
Yeah.
the wind and the
Definitely I was thinking about holy shit. I don't know about you, man. Holy shit all day long, man.
That shit made me laugh so hard.
But he was talking about like, I don't know whether or not to, I don't know. I would feel like I need to masturbate. And Ram laughs and is like, "Do or don't. I love you unconditionally."
Exactly. It's just like, who cares?
What do you want to be forgiven for? You haven't done anything.
Good Lord. And I remember even his doctor was like, "You should probably masturbate."
Yes. Yeah. He got pain in his testicles at one point after his wife left him. And it was his doctor actually told him to masturbate. So I showed you this part when we were on the plane on the way back, and this is where I'm going to end my official fanboying of Ram Dass and Pete Holmes. But so Pete and his love of his life, Val, are about to
The sweetest story.
have their child.
Yeah, we didn't cover that, but
We didn't
y'all
cover
need
that,
to like
but
definitely read it for that part because it's very cute.
I
and
hope
very
Val
sweet.
listens to this.
Yeah.
Because we love her for sure. I've been listening to their We Made It Weird podcast a little bit lately. but she is like 5-6 days away from delivering a baby, and Pete has run off to Maui to go be,
I would be.
with his boyfriend.
She's like definitely the cool girl, because I would be like, fuck you.
Yeah. Understandably, but Val does just
Cool
like
girl points. Like,
the
I don't
way
care.
more
Whatever.
valuable thing of, I think you need to go hang out for a week with this man who is obviously your guru before he passes away, and you don't get a chance to ever do it again.
Yeah.
And he gets a picture with Ram Dass when he's about to leave and go get on the plane, and they're just grinning huge. And this picture is in the book.
Yeah.
And he sends the picture to Val, and she goes, "It looks like you're in love." And
You gay?
and I had to immediately pull up the picture of me and
Yeah.
Wayne Kramer with the fucking exact same look on my face. I'm just like, well, this is a couple of guys who are in love,
Yeah. Broing out for sure. And
growing out.
Wayne is also a small, older, bald man. So
He's my guru for sure. He's made all the mistakes before me, so I don't have to make the exact same
yeah,
mistakes.
he's one of those ones that Pete talked about where it's like, well, then I was doing drugs and living a rock and roll lifestyle, and then I became enlightened. He's like, why couldn't I do all the fun stuff before I found Christianity?
Was there anything else that you wanted to chat about?
No, I basically, you know what? I said my things, and I said all the things that I had problems with, and all the things I liked, and all the things I identified with.
In short, I feel like while this is not a self-help book in the conventional sense,
It was more freaking helpful than some of these books we be reading.
It's-
Like, gonna be straight up.
it grabbed me by the shoulders, straightened me up, pointed my chin up, and sent me off in a direction with some confidence that I didn't otherwise have.
Yeah.
That I was like, you know what? Fuck yeah. I'm going to go find God. I'm going to go find, like, maybe it doesn't have to be God with a capital G. Maybe
You don't have to find him.
it's as
It.
close as the air on your
Yeah,
skin.
it's there all the time.
So it's a definition of the higher power that I'm much more comfortable with,
Yeah.
and much more closely aligned with what I just inherently felt anyway.
Yeah.
I feel like I feel less guilt. I feel less weird about, horny thoughts. And I think that the book was aptly named. So thanks, Pete Holmes, for writing this cute little story about your life, and for telling us what you feel like it all means. Amber, do you want to hit us with the socials? And
Well, so you told me that Pete is not on social media, but he does have
he has
a
social
social media that is, for his shows and things. We're actually going to be seeing him in February in Atlanta.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm pretty excited. I haven't seen him live. But his is just at Pete Holmes. And his podcast, You Made It Weird, is on Spotify, wherever you want to get podcasts from. He also has a really, really cool further reading section in the book. So you can find all of the content for Duncan Trussell, for Ram Dass,
Eckhart Tolle.
yeah, for all of these folks and all of these books he's mentioned throughout his own memoir.
Don't forget that y'all can get those books at your local bookstore.
Yep, it is
Or
already.
you can use ours.
Yeah, it's already on our bookish list. So if you want to go on our link tree, which is on our Instagram, and click on our book list via Bookish ATL, you can order it and it will benefit that bookstore that we love. But our Instagram is at checking.in.podcast.
Amber, do we have any idea what we're going to read for next time?
Oh God, I haven't even thought about it.
Okay, we haven't even thought about it, folks. So we will
Better
surprise
get
the
to
shit
knowing.
out of
As I like to say, well, you better get to
Better
knowing.
get to knowing. All right, folks. Thank y'all very much.
Thank
See you next time.